Hi, this is Rodolfo Eric Angat, your teacher in Earth and Environmental Science. Today we'll be learning about soil erosion. Our essential question for today is, how do we practice soil conservation? Our target competencies for this lesson are the following. I can explain the importance of the topsoil. I can identify the different layers of the soil. I can explain soil plowing and its effects. I can explain how overgrazing results to desertification. I can identify ways on how to either prevent or minimize soil erosion. And finally, I can explain how paved roads lead to flooding and erosion. Let us first define topsoil. The topsoil is the top layer of the soil. Topsoil is the darkest layer because it contains the most humus. The topsoil is very thin though. It's the most important one. It is the most important layer of the soil, but it's also the thinnest. Its thickness can only range from 2 to 8 inches or about 5 centimeters to 20 centimeters. If we lose the topsoil, then the soil will no longer be good for growing plants. So we really need to protect the topsoil. Soil scientists divide the soil into layers from the surface down to the underlying bedrock. This is called the soil profile. So this here is what we call the soil profile. The layers in a soil profile are called as horizons. So we have these horizons here: topsoil, subsoil, weather rock fragments, bedrock. The topsoil is also known as A horizon, subsoil as B horizon, weathered rock fragments as C horizon, and the bedrock as the D horizon. Of course, the most important one is the topsoil because it is rich in organic materials, which is the humus, and minerals. The topsoil is the upper and outermost layer of the soil, and usually about 2 inches to 8 inches. It has the highest concentration of organic matter and microorganisms, and it is where most of Earth's biological soil activity occurs. This is a practice by farmers that began a long, long time ago. This is called soil tilling or soil plowing. Soil tilling is done to loosen the soil and aerate it so that the bacteria or the microorganisms that are in the soil can accelerate the production of nutrients. However, in recent studies, it was found out that soil tilling has a disadvantage. When soil is loose, it is easily blown by the wind, and when it rains, the runoff easily washes away the very precious topsoil. And that's the reason why some farmers stop or minimize soil tilling or soil plowing. A loose soil is very prone to erosion. Soil tilling or plowing is an agricultural process used for cutting, lifting, and loosening the soil. The benefit of soil tilling is that it nurtures the soil by providing aeration and improving drainage. But again, when the soil is loose, it is easily eroded by wind and water. That's the disadvantage. Now, how about this one? Asphalt and concrete road prevent percolation of water to the soil. Now, this is an asphalt road, and this is very common in highly urbanized areas, in areas where urbanization is growing. Now, when the soil is covered with asphalt or either asphalt or concrete, what happens is it prevents the soil from absorbing the water. So this water that flows on the surface, which we call as runoff, continuously collect until it becomes so much that it causes this kind of erosion in areas that are not paved or are not covered with concrete. Unlike when this is not covered with asphalt or concrete, what happens is as the water flows, some of it or most of it is absorbed by the soil through the process of percolation. This is beneficial in two ways. It prevents flash flood and it also recharges the groundwater. But when it is covered like this, what happens is the water collects and becomes flash flood and causes this one, massive erosion. Another problem with our soil is overgrazing. In overgrazing, what happens is since we need a lot of food right now, like beef and milk from cattle and different kinds of animals, what happens is some farmers just let their animals roam freely in the pasture or in the grassland and eat anywhere. This is not good. When when the animals or the livestock are just let loose in the pasture, what they do is that they concentrate on one area and they will keep on feeding in that area until all the grass in the area dies and the soil loses its cover. This results to something that we call as desertification. When overgrazing is done in a certain area, the result of which is called desertification. Now, this is an example of desertification right here. This place used to be like this, but then it was utilized as a grazing land wherein the cattle were released there without control, and these cattle ate all the grass and removed the coverings of the soil and trampled on the soil too until the soil can no longer grow the grass or its vegetation and it turned like this, like a desert. Pasture becomes a desert, very dry. And this happened because the grazing cattle were not controlled. Now, to prevent desertification in grazing lands or in pastures, one way that can be done is by following these steps. Pasture lands need sufficient recovery time between bites. So step one, build a fence. Divide the pasture land into several quadrants or in several areas using fences. See this one, there's a fence here. So this livestock here can only feed in this area. They cannot go to other areas and feed in all different areas. They're concentrated here. Let the animals feed in one area. Do not let them roam and feed in the whole pasture. After a few days of feeding in this area, move the animals into another area, like in this area now. This will allow the other area to have time to revive and allow the regrowth of grass. So if you move the livestock from one place to another, that would give time to the pasture to recover and regrow its covering, its vegetation covering, and thus will prevent the process of desertification. We don't like desertification. That would ruin the soil and would make the land very unproductive. Now, this happened in the United States. It's called the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl was a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and agriculture of the US and Canadian prairies. Prairies are also grasslands. During the 1930s, severe drought and a failure to take care of the topsoil resulted in the Dust Bowl. Back in the days, the farmers just kept on planting and planting and harvesting and letting their livestock feed on the grass without thinking about the future. And because of that, the soil lost its lost its vegetative cover and dried up, and desertification followed, and the desertification resulted to what we call the dust bowl. And again, this happened in the 1930s in the US, and because of this lesson, farmers now know that they need to take care of the soil. And this is another one. Okay, so this is a dust bowl too right here. When the soil becomes too dry and the wind blows, this is what happens. Now, how can grass and other vegetation prevent soil erosion? There are two ways. First, the leaves of the vegetation absorb the impact of the rain droplets. This prevents the soil from becoming loose. Look at this one. When when this droplet of rain hits leaf, the leaf absorbs the impact. Thus, when it drips into the ground, it's no longer that strong. However, without vegetation, the raindrop would splash directly into the soil and will cause the soil to loosen, somewhat like when a meteor hits the surface of Earth or the surface of the moon. The impact causes a crater and causes the materials to be thrown away in all direction, making those materials easily erode. Of course, on the moon there is no erosion because there is no water or air on the moon. So there is no erosion there. All the craters that were created by the meteors there are still there. None of them have been erased because there is no erosion on the surface of the moon. On Earth, we have erosion because we have air and water. So that's the first way that the vegetation prevent soil erosion. The second way that the vegetation prevent erosion is because plants have roots, and the roots of vegetation, when I say vegetation, by the way, I'm referring to the plants, the different kinds of plants. The roots of the vegetation bind the soil and prevent erosion. So those are the two reasons why plants are very important in erosion prevention. Now, land degradation brought about by soil erosion. On the left side, let's identify the causes of soil erosion. First, we have deforestation. When deforestation happens, soil erosion follows. Agriculture. Agriculture can cause deforestation. Agriculture causes deforestation. Agriculture also causes soil erosion because the soil is tilled or plowed. Next, number three, urbanization also causes soil erosion because of the construction that are being made and many other human activities. Of course, overgrazing causes soil erosion because of the resulting desertification. Global warming makes our planet so warm that it dries up the soil easily and is blown away by wind. So these are just some of the reasons why soil erosion is becoming a big problem now. Desertification is a result of soil erosion and the improper uh, processes that we are doing to the soil. Now, of course, there's always a solution. Let's plant trees, let's take care of the plants, and then use windbreakers and then proper irrigation. These are just some of the solutions. Now, other solutions to prevent soil erosion is contour plowing. Following the contour of the land as the farmers plant their crops is one way to help lessen soil erosion. Look at this one. If the slope of the land is like this, so they'll be sloping the contour of the land in a way that it is placed like a staircase and follows how the land is contoured in planting, allows the water to slowly flow, and by slowing the flow of water, the the process of soil erosion also slows down. By the way, water flowing on the surface is what we call as runoff. Terracing and contour plowing come together. So here, terracing and contour plowing prevent or slow down erosion by slowing down the runoff. Runoff is water flowing on a slope. So look at this one. So when the water flows here, it would be like a staircase. And since it's like a staircase, the water flows slower. And again, if you slow down the runoff, you slow down the process of erosion. Terracing means shaping the land into like a staircase, while contour flowing is following the contour of the land with how plants or crops are planted. Now, you have three choices here. Which of the following will permit the greatest percolation and least runoff? Remember, percolation is responsible for groundwater recharge. Now, is your choice the first one, the second one, or the third one? Which of the three will permit the greatest percolation? Cemented path, space tiles, or grass lawn? Remember, percolation is the process whereby the water is absorbed by the ground and reaches the groundwater, which we call as the process of groundwater recharge. So let's discuss one by one. Pavement stops or slows down percolation because the water cannot be absorbed because of the covering brought upon by the pavement. Now, how about the space tiles? In space tiles, water can be absorbed by the soil because there are spaces in between tiles where the water can seep through. Now, the third one, lawn covered with grass allow the greatest percolation because not only that the plants allow it faster to happen, it's all open spaces for the water. So the one that will allow the greatest percolation among the three is the third one right here. Next one. More percolation means more groundwater and less flooding and erosion. Now, what is percolation? Whenever it rains, the water absorbs the soil absorbs the water, and when the water reaches the groundwater right here, then that is what we call as groundwater recharge. The water needs to reach the groundwater for it to be considered as a groundwater recharge. Now, the groundwater that we have is the one that we use as source of drinking water, and we get that from well. Now, the aquifer is also known as groundwater. Okay? Of course, there's a slight difference between the two. We'll be learning those difference in the future. For now, I need you to concentrate on the idea of groundwater recharge and its relationship to percolation. Another way to prevent erosion is by using soil mulch. There are two types of soil mulch. We have the organic. Organic includes dry leaves and branches, while inorganic include plastic net, pebbles, rocks, gravel, and plastic sheeting. Now, this one on the left, these are organic because these are shredded branches and leaves, while this one is inorganic because these are rocks and some of them are even plastics. Now, you have to remember that mulch is any material that is spread or laid over the surface of the soil as covering to prevent erosion. Now, mulching, this is organic and this is inorganic. Now, this one is covered with plastic. Now, soil mulch, why are they better? Soil mulch that are organic are better because they conserve soil moisture, improve the fertility and health of the soil, and they reduce the weed growth and prevent soil erosion. Like the soil mulch here on the one that I'm pointing here is organic soil mulch. So as these shredded branches and leaves decompose, they fertilize the soil. And when it rains, the mulch absorb the impact of the raindrop, thus preventing the soil from becoming loose and easily eroded by runoff. Now, some techniques that they do also to prevent erosion is called soil matting. You might have seen this on the side of the highway. So those slopes there are covered with mats and nets to prevent the erosion of soil and rocks. So this is called soil matting right here. Now, what are the benefits of soil matting? Okay, mulch keeps sunlight from reaching the soil, minimizing evaporation, so the soil becomes moist. And moist soil is good for growing plants. Okay, and of course, provides fertilizer. Farmers employ different ways to prevent erosion from their farmlands because they have to. If they don't protect their topsoil, then the crops will not be growing well. The plants will not be growing well. So what are they doing to prevent erosion in farmlands? So the first one, we have the strip cropping. So they plant their uh, crops in a strip arrangement. Second one, aside from that, they also use ground cover plants. Same like, it's almost like using mulch, but instead of using the mulch, they use plant covers so that the soil will not be easily loosened when it rains. Another way is the use of windbreakers. These trees are these trees were planted in a straight line so that when the wind blows, the wind will be broken by the leaves and branches of the leaves. So when it goes to the other side, the wind will not be that strong. That's why it's called wind. That's why they are called as windbreakers. Terracing is another way. In terracing slows down the flow of runoff, thus slowing down erosion. Contour cropping is the process of planting the crops following the contour of the land or the shape of the land. No-till planting is another one. It means that the farmers don't till or plow the soil anymore, but instead cover the soil with the crop residues of the previous harvest. Crop residues are the leaves and branches of the crops in the previous harvest. Like when they planted corn, they'll get the corn, and then the leaves and branches, they'll just leave them in the farm and let them decompose there. Those things are what they call as the crop residues. Cover crops, using like the one that I mentioned earlier, the ground cover plants. Cover crops are maintained in the farm when the farm is not being used so that the soil will be covered and protected against the agent of erosion like the wind and the water. Some farmers use cover crops that they can harvest too. So it's a double purpose thing. So like you can plant peanuts, you can plant alfalfa and many other types of herbs and shrubs that can cover the soil, and at the same time you can harvest them after a few months. Now we have terracing, matting, windbreaker, and contour farming. I need you to remember the pictures. This is windbreaker. When the wind blows from this direction, from the east, the trees break the wind, and when it reaches the area on the west where the crops are, the wind is no longer that strong, so the crops will not be ruined by the wind and the soil will not be eroded too. So these are called windbreakers here. Okay. Now, how about the riparian buffers? This is just a review. We've learned about riparian buffers before. Riparian buffers are also plants or vegetation, but these plants or vegetation are found on the river bank or on the sides of the river. Riparian buffers are very important because when runoff bring pollutants like excess fertilizers and sediments and many other things that should not be in the river water, these plants here absorb those chemicals and stop the sediments from reaching the river, thus making the river pristine or very nice and unpolluted. So riparian buffers are essential on the river banks because they prevent the river from being polluted. Okay. Another way to prevent erosion, especially in an area that is close to the coastline, is by building seawall and riprap. Okay? Riprap are loose stone used to form foundation for breakwater or other structure. So these are the riprap right here. So these are riprap are loose stones and rocks right here. These are the riprap. And then this one here is the seawall. And then we also have the oysters. And why oysters? Oysters are a crucial component of global ocean health, providing food, jobs, and habitat. Oyster reefs. It disappeared. Oyster reefs. Going back, it's moving by itself. Oyster reefs provide important barriers to storms and tides, preventing erosion and protecting productive estuary waters. Oyster also act like a vacuum cleaner. They remove nitrate pollutants in the water. So these oysters here, they have a very hard shell, so they can uh, they can weaken the waves. And not only that, since they're living things, they can consume the nitrates so that it will not cause eutrophication. Nitrates cause eutrophication, which ruins the dissolved oxygen of the water. Without the dissolved oxygen, the fish in the water would die. But with the oysters here, using the nitrates, then dissolved oxygen of the dissolved oxygen of the water will not be endangered because of eutrophication. Okay, so this is again seawall, riprap, and the oysters. Okay, so this is the actual appearance of it. So you have the plantings here, you have the plants, just like what I showed to you earlier about the riparian vapor. This is like a riparian vapor. This is a riparian vapor here. Now this one here is called the riprap, and deep in the water here we have oysters. And in addition to the riprap and the oysters, we have the vegetation here. This one does not have a wall, but it's still a good way to protect the property from erosion. Okay, adding rocks, sediments, and plants stabilize the shoreline. That's the riprap, sediments and vegetation. Now let's watch this video. It's only 1 minute and 51 seconds for us to learn more on how erosion is prevented in coastal areas.
There are two major methods that can be used to slow down coastal erosion. There are traditional engineered coastal protection structures and beach nourishment. The coastal protection structures include seawalls, jetties, groins, and breakwaters. Seawalls are walls with a steep face that are built along the coasts. They are supposed to protect the beaches from wave erosion. Jetties are structures that go out into the sea and protect harbors from sediment buildup. Groins are walls perpendicular to the coasts. Their purpose is to capture sediment and stop it from drifting away from the coasts. Breakwaters are offshore structures that are used to lessen the force of waves and other types of weather. By lessening the force, less erosion will happen. These structures are supposed to stop erosion, but they usually cause more erosion instead. However, the erosion tends to stay near the place that it comes off from. Coastal protection structures are also considered unattractive to beach owners. Beach nourishment requires sand and sediment to be added to an eroding beach. In other words, it replenishes the sand on the beach. It is also a very expensive method. Ocean City in Maryland spent $40 million on beach nourishment. Beach nourishment is a very controversial method because it can help and harm the coasts. Beach nourishment can be harmful to the ecosystem because plants and animals can be buried under the sand when beach nourishment occurs. However, other sources say that if there is no blockage to the sand movement, the method is very effective. Some people say that this is the only effective way to keep a beach usable. While these methods can help slow down coastal erosion for a short time, we have to be more aware of what we do to our environment in order to help slow down coastal erosion.
Okay. So I hope with this discussion you are equipped with the knowledge on how to get a very good grade in our MC assessment. Okay? Thank you so much, guys. See you again next time. Bye-bye.